This may look like a piece of garbage, and well, that's because it is, but it's a very special piece of garbage. In this quick video, I'll tell you what makes this destroyed, smelly old game an almost priceless piece of gaming memorabilia. As we often do around here, let's travel back in time to the early 1980s. Olivia Newton-John was telling us to get physical. Ronald Reagan was antagonizing the evil empire and making us all hide under our desks. Yes, we still did this in the 1980s. And the video game industry was tanking. The crash of 1983 changed the video game industry forever. Atari, Mattel, and Coleco all lost hundreds of millions of dollars and eventually gave up on video games completely. This video is not really about that, that's a massive subject. But one of the great legends to come out of this period was Atari literally burying unsold ET cartridges and covering them up with concrete, something later generations of gamers heard about and apparently said, no fucking way. Now, to those of us who lived through this period, that this happened was never in doubt. The Great Atari Dump was covered extensively in the press at the time, from local Alamogordo newspapers all the way up to the New York Times. Yet somehow the gaming equivalent of the truther movement grew over the years, insisting that it was a myth. There were no specific pictures of ET or other Atari merchandise being buried, they argued, and therefore no real proof despite all the news coverage, official statements from Alamogordo officials, general photos of the dump itself, and lack of denials by Atari. Finally, in 2014, Zach Penn decided to unearth the dump for a documentary called Atari Game Over.
People, they want some kind of tangible evidence that that dump did take place.
I highly recommend watching this film if you're at all interested in this period in gaming history, and especially if you have any doubt at all that this burial actually happened. Spoilers ahead, Darth Vader's Luke's father, and yes, they found the supposedly mythical Atari dump. They dug up 1,300 of the estimated 700,000 game cartridges buried there, some of them ET, others different titles that hadn't sold by the time Atari closed their distribution center in El Paso, Texas, which is where all this stuff came from. This is one of those games. No, it's not ET, but it is from what's now somewhat pompously called the Atari Dig, as if archaeologists had finally uncovered the lost city of Atlantis. I've got the certificate of authenticity from the city of Alamogordo to prove it, along with the signature of Howard Scott Warshaw, E.T.'s game designer, who was present at the dig. My copy of Defender also came with several news clippings from the time that were always publicly available and should have been proof enough to anyone that this was no myth. I guess I shouldn't complain though, because the questioning of this event is what led me to owning this little piece of gaming history. Shortly after the documentary film, the city of Alamogordo put several hundred of the games dug up on eBay. The sudden commonness of them meant they all went for under $100, and I thought an actual copy of ET was too expensive at about $80. I paid $30 or so for my copy of Defender. Today, with only a few hundred of these out there and nearly all of them spoken for, the only ET copy on eBay is listed at $4,000, while even my Defender is a $1,000 game. Still, I probably should have just bit the bullet and paid the $80 for an ET. I've only opened the bag that it came in once, and at the time I thought once is definitely enough. The smell is something I can only describe as a cross between rotting fish and horse diarrhea. Amazing that plastic and cardboard can smell like this, but remember that it's been underground and in contact with organic material and bacteria for 34 years. I imagine that it's still decomposing in the bag. The smell seems to confirm that the bacteria are still in there doing their thing, and farting out their waste gases as they eat away. I've never actually opened the game itself. Technically, despite the condition that it's in, it is still a sealed, new-in-box copy of Atari 2600 Defender. That's one of the reasons I bought this particular copy. Only about a third of the games pulled from the ground were sealed, with the rest being loose cartridges. Mine even has a price tag on it, already marked down at least once, indicating that it was probably returned from a store to Atari when they decided it was no longer sellable. There's not much more to say about this, but I do want to give you some quickie videos now and then as I work on longer ones, and I thought it might be interesting to show you one of the games that was part of one of the great legends of gaming history. The video game world is rife with urban myths, and it's rare to get your hands on definitive physical evidence that proves the truth of one of those myths. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.